This episode of the BREWtally Speaking podcast is brought to you by On Point Pomade. Keep your beard and hair looking on point with their line of pomades and beard oils over at onpointpomade.com. Use our code BSP15 at checkout and get 15% off your total purchase order. So thanks again to On Point Pomade for sponsoring our show. This episode is also sponsored by the Bean Bastard Coffee. Head over to thebeanbastard.com and pick up any one of their delicious hand-roasted coffees. Coffee lovers will also enjoy their hand-cut and handmade espresso candles and soaps as well. If you're in the Buffalo, New York area, head to their store located at 448 Elmwood Avenue. And thanks again to the Bean Bastard for supporting this show. BREWtally Speaking podcast is proudly sponsored by Rockabilia.com. With over 500,000 officially licensed items in their online store, you're guaranteed to find something you need. Use our code BREWtally and get 10% off your total purchase order. Now on to the show.
People say you have to have a lot of passion for what you're doing. This rings true because it's so hard that if you don't, any rational person would give up. It's really hard, and you have to do it over a sustained period of time. So if you don't love it, and if you're not having fun doing it, you're gonna give
up. What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the BREWtally Speaking podcast. I am your host, John. And this episode's guest is the almighty riff lord himself, Mr. Kirk Winstein of the almighty Crowbar, of Down, of Kingdom of Sorrow, so many fucking legendary and great bands. This was a really great chat. As you'll actually hear me reference in the actual chat itself, I ended up going to a show a while ago where Crowbar was playing, and I had texted a friend of mine who had Kirk on the podcast before, and I was like, I feel like I should just go up to him and ask him if he wants to be on the show. And he goes, no, just go up to his wife, Robin, who's working merch probably, and ask her. Like, she would be the one to set everything up. So I go up to her, I get the email information, and I tried to send the email like right away, and for whatever reason, like the venue just wasn't having any service or something, and it just kept telling me that I couldn't send the email. So I kept trying to send the email, and it just wouldn't go through. So then I'm like, all right, whatever, I guess I'll try later, And I wake up the next day, and I'm like, all right, I'm gonna email Robin. And I go to open my email, and I see that I had sent the email. Every time I tried sending it, it just put it into a queue of basically like waiting for it to go through. And I remember just this like feeling of horror looking at my emails being like, oh no, what the fuck? It sent them all. Why would it do that? And I was I was so bummed. And I think I sent another email to Robin explaining the situation, and I never heard back from her. And I was like, oh my gosh, she probably thinks I'm some weirdo who's like, you don't know how to use fucking email? Like, what the fuck? But I ended up getting Kirk on in due time anyway. Really enjoyed this chat. With the new record that the band had put out, it was... Lyrically, it's really heavy, and I'm not saying that, a lot of other Crowbar records and lyrically Kirk doesn't write, really poignant lyrics, but I think I just kind of really resonated with this one, being my age, being, with some of the singles kind of talking about with losing people and drug abuse and, substance abuse and so forth. And I think, honestly, it's just at a point now where it's really affecting everyone. I don't know, and if you're listening to this and you're someone that, homelessness, drug abuse, drugs as a whole haven't, affected your life in some way, shape, or form, or haven't affected someone I mean, props to you, I guess, and your friends for making better life choices, but I know in my life, it's taken a handful of people away from me, and it's always something, and I didn't make this comment in the chat with Kirk, because it just didn't feel appropriate given where the conversation was going, but it's one of those, I think one of the bigger things, like I remember a bunch of people at a job I had, we had lost someone, and then lost another person that was close to them a week later, literally. And it was one of those things where, as I was listening to people talking at work, it wasn't, it's really sad that it's really sad this person has passed away. But it was more of a focus on, like, man, isn't it fucked up that you can't trust the drugs you get anymore? Like, that you have to worry about what's in it. And it's like, I kind of remember just being like, that is the most asinine take I've ever heard. Like, your friend just died, and your thought isn't necessarily 100% like, I'm really sad my friend passed, but it's also, how fucked up is it that you can't trust these hard drugs anymore and what's in them? Like, I guess I get it. You can't trust things, and that's not how the way things used to be, but I think it speaks to this bigger, I don't want to say generational thing, because I think we all go through this as we get younger. And, honestly, I don't even think it's when we're younger. I think it's just how we think of life. I think it's how we are as people. We think all the bad fucking things that happen to people can't possibly happen to us. It's kind of interesting. I was thinking the other night, actually, before going to bed, about how, we heard gunshots. We've had some shootings and stuff like that happen in this city. And they happen somewhat nearish to where I live. And it's one of those things where I literally have never thought or been afraid of, like, I could get shot. It's never really ever been a thing where I've been and had that fear. And I have definitely been in situations where some shit could pop off. I've literally had a gun pointed at me that I didn't know was loaded, but by a friend. And he didn't know it was loaded at the time either until he, basically chunked the fucking bullet out of the shotgun and was just like, holy shit, I didn't know that was loaded. So, I mean, I've had situations where, like, you're like, holy fuck, this could have been real bad. This could be very serious. But I've never had the fear of, like, something actually happening to me. And I feel like there's that same sense when it comes to doing drugs. I feel like everyone's like, well, that was so-and-so. They were reckless. They, whatever the excuses that we tell ourselves. But we never assume that the bad thing will happen to us until it does. And I think in this situation, I remember thinking, it's very weird that people are like, oh, it's fucked up, you can't trust these drugs anymore. But to have someone a week later that was, like, best friends with the person who had passed away die from the same fucking drug, from the same fucking thing, I remember just really being like, are you that fucking stupid to think that it wouldn't happen to you? Like, you were one person removed away from this happening. Why wouldn't you think that it would happen to you? Why do you think that person was unlucky and that you're going to just be able to go by unscathed? It's baffling. It's baffling the lies, I guess, that we tell ourselves as people that, like, we're invincible. Those horrible things that happen to people getting robbed, people getting raped, people getting shot, whatever atrocities happen to people in life, we always just assume that they can't happen to us. And I think that that's a really interesting thing to think of. Like, what is it that gives us this sense of invincibility? And while I haven't pinned it down, I guess I don't know. Potentially, maybe it's just this weird privilege we have of, I guess, of how we've grown up in some instances. I don't want to say it's necessarily a racial thing, but, if you've lived in affluent neighborhoods all your life and you've never had anything bad happen to you, and the worst that happens is maybe bad grades or, someone, gotten pregnant early, or I don't know. I don't really know what's a bad thing to happen to people at a young age, but I feel like maybe if you had been around these things so much ingrained in you from your childhood, maybe you wouldn't feel that way. It's something I've been, like I said, it's something I've been kind of thinking a little bit more about. And as we were talking about, the lyrics on the new Crowbar record and how Kirk personally had an experience with it with his daughter going to college and some of the things that, she went through with these things. It's a thing where it's so much more prevalent now than I think it ever has been. And to just think that it's not going to happen to you or someone I feel it's such an arrogant way of thinking. But I didn't mean to get on a soapbox here and kind of maybe bring the vibe down. But it's definitely something I've been thinking a lot about. In addition to putting out all these episodes, thinking back to Andrew and I from Dance Gavin Dance Idola talking about losing friends, family to drugs and so forth, and it's kind of been more on my mind. It's the anniversary of one of my friends passing away, and as I said in that episode, I don't have answers to anything, and I know that drugs are insanely responsible for a lot of the problems, in addition to other things that I'm definitely not going to talk about on here. But it's been on my mind a lot more, and it just is something that I kind of thinking about as the world constantly is, losing people to fentanyl overdoses and so forth, and it's not going away. It's getting worse, and I feel like maybe we just need to, like a lot of things, we need to talk about it. We need to raise awareness of these things and not just assume that it's not going to happen to us, because it fucking can. Anyway, this is my conversation with Kirk Winstein of Crowbar. I'll talk to you all on the other side of it. Hello, are you able to hear me now?
Yeah, I got you now.
All right. Thank you so much for rescheduling for me.
Oh, no worries, man. It was just last night was like late and so fucking hot. I was sleeping, and I tried, so I was like, I thought I had my ringer off, and then Liz hit me up, and I'm like, oh shit, But yeah, all good. No worries.
You guys are in New Jersey, if I'm not mistaken, correct?
Yeah, Atlantic City tonight. So
right.
It's actually a nice venue. I've only played in 30-some years of touring. I only played Atlantic City one time. Went down. That was a good while ago.
Is it weird that there are still places in a 30-year career that you haven't played yet?
I mean, certain places, like I've had people that live in the state of Maine, hit me up and they're like, man, why don't you ever come up here? I'm like, because we would be, it's so far out of the way for something that's not really much of a market, that it wouldn't be a good paying gig, blah, 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 blah. There's certain areas are hard to hit, but I mean, we've even played in Hawaii. I mean, I've been as far as, overseas. I mean, I've done 46, 47 countries now. But yeah, I mean, it's strange in a place that's like this. I've only played one time, because, but then again, it's not really as far. I mean, to show it down wasn't all that great attendance-wise. I don't know if there's really much of a scene or anything here. I don't really know much about Atlantic City, But the venue's really nice. The promoter's real nice. Sound system's great. Sound check was good. So we're just gonna have fun. Hope everything's smooth, man.
It's always funny when talking to kind of OGs of the game who have been doing it for so long. I hear so many young bands, that complain about every little thing, and I feel like you guys are just like, sounds good, people are nice, fuck it, who cares?
Yeah, I mean that's pretty much the attitude. It's like the older you get, and the longer you do it, the less you worry about all the little things. You're just like we'll make it happen. So we try to be as accommodating as we can. Which I think is the only way to really do it. So I mean we got nothing to complain about. So every night's not a perfect sound system, a perfect stage, blah 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 blah. But it is what it is. It's gotta, just feel blessed that you're able to be out here doing it. Honestly.
Yeah. So really, kind of the gist of the show is it's not so much an interview as much of a kind of just a conversation. But I did kind of want to talk a little bit about the new record, because there was a fact, I think, that I uncovered in reading something that you had done recently. And am I not mistaken in reading that The Fear That Binds You, you actually were writing that for Body Count initially?
Correct.
What?
Yep.
Correct me if I'm wrong. I don't really know that I've known that you do songwriting stuff for other artists. Is that something you have done a lot of before?
Honestly, no. But what happened was Mike Ginner, who's he's been around with record companies and journalism and everything forever. Everybody in the metal scene pretty much knows him. He had hit me up and asked me if I was interested in writing stuff for Body Count. I said, yeah, absolutely. Just to maybe write a song or two or whatever. Well, come to find out, what happened is, if you hear that song, The Fear That Binds You, it's mainly more of an upbeat song. So I'm trying to write shit that I think would kind of fit Body Count, and then they're really wanting me to write more Crowbar-ish, like doomy, slow stuff, So the timing just didn't really work out. I would have been honored and would have loved to do it, but what happened was they were, it was kind of like they were to the point where they were almost halfway through doing drum tracks by the time we kind of got on the same page with, oh, okay, so you want me to write yet, something like this, okay. And it just, timing-wise, just didn't happen. And I was just like, I changed up a few things, and I said, all right, fellas, we got a Crowbar song. So that ended up being the first song written for Zero and Below.
It's funny because as I was listening to it, when I read that, I kind of went back and listened to it, and I was like, it's weird because I don't hear kind of the Body Count sound, even though I know they're really good at kind of melding influences of whoever the collaborators are. But it was one of those, it's funny you say it like that I was trying to pick it apart going, okay, what is it about this that kind of would have lent itself to Body Count, or how would it have fit in what Body Count's been doing recently? And because I was like, it honestly sounds like a Crowbar song. It sounds like you. So it was kind of interesting to think about that from that perspective, and then thinking about like, shit, I don't know if I've ever heard that Kirk writes for anything other than projects he's associated with, and in trying to Google
I've never
it.
Actually
Go ahead.
Done that, like for anybody else, but I guess it's just, to me, it sounds like, Crowbar, and sounds like me, because when I write riffs, that's me, so, to be honest, I love Body Count, but it's something like, I really wouldn't, like if they told me, look, we want, which in the during the communication and miscommunication of everything, by the time, like I said, we finally got on the same page, it was kind of like, it was just too late into the recording process, but, it was more or less like, okay, they want me to write like something that's, slower, doony, or whatever, that kind of fits, my normal writing style. Anyway you slice it, I love the song, and in hindsight, like I said, I would have been honored to write something for them, even if it was just a riff or two, but, I'm glad that everything worked out the way it did, and we got a killer Crowbar tune out of it, so.
Yeah, 100%. It's a real monster riff to start the record off, and I think kind of paves the way for the rest of the album. It was kind of interesting actually listening to a lot more of this record, and I don't know if it's just kind of coming off of some personal experiences in the last couple of years for myself, but seeing the video for Chemical Gods really kind of struck me, and I'm sure you've been getting probably a lot of attention to that song for its lyrical themes and kind of the visuals you attach to it as well. Just a lot of people probably saying, they've been there, and, it's really hard to watch your friends kind of throw their life away to drugs and substances and so forth. But,
yeah, totally.
How has that been for you? Again, I might be incorrect with this, but, you guys don't seem like a band necessarily that probably would get a ton of that, maybe, where you're playing songs where, you might get the music saved me, the music, did this to me or whatever, but to kind of speak so much to such a heavy-handed thing that's going on and kind of really plaguing the country really badly right now, I feel like it kind of opens up you specifically as the lyricist and main songwriter of the song to kind of tap into something where a lot more people will open up to you.
Yeah, it's like, I've always tried to write personal, stuff or just things that are about dark subject matter, but, trying to give, like, hope. Look, there's a light at the end of the tunnel type, thing. And, that's a perfect example of that. And I guess, it's everywhere, I'm constantly, losing friends and people I know, and you just hear about it, it's everywhere, man. It's just terrible. And now it's like, you gotta be, in my opinion, no disrespect to anybody, but anybody that buys any drugs off the street, regardless of what the fuck it is these days is crazy, because with this fentanyl crap they're putting in everything, people are dropping like flies, it's not, people just think, oh, they're going to go party on Saturday night and get a little 50 bag of Coke or some shit, and the fucking thing's got fentanyl. They still want to drop that, son. I mean, not that, that's a great thing to go get a bag of Coke and go party on Saturday night, but I'm just saying, but yeah, these days I think it's really, really scary. I mean, I just heard about a person the other day that had a similar, I didn't know the person, but it's a friend of a friend, it said that's exactly what happened. This girl scored some pill or something and fucking, I think she ended up like snorting the pill and then realizing that when she did it, that like she tried to make herself throw up and everything and try to get it out of her system, and it's just the fentanyl was such a strong drug, that she died. So I mean, I think the chemical gods thing. I mean, I think most people it hits home with most everybody. Everybody at least probably has a friend or knows of someone who, like you said, pretty basically through their life away, with chemical, addiction. It's a tough thing, man. I mean, everybody I know has had their ups and downs with different things. I mean, I'm no saint, I mean, I've made tons of changes in my life, but I'm still, it's still a daily, thing to just keep, it's like every day somebody's, like, one thing that was tough for me to quit was whiskey. I love whiskey, and people are constantly, man, can I buy you a shot? And I'm like, no, you know what? You can buy me a beer. I'll take a beer. How's that? I figure it's a lot less of an evil than the hard shit.
Yeah.
But yeah, man, it's just kind of one of those things. It's something that I think hits home with pretty much everybody, unfortunately, these days. I mean, the opiate crisis in this country is horrible. And then when you throw in that so many of these drugs people are buying off the street, regardless of what it is, are laced with the fentanyl stuff, man. It's fucking crazy out there. It's like it used to be Russian roulette with one bullet in the chamber. Now it's like 5 out of 6 chambers are full. That's much more dangerous, in my opinion, than it is these days.
It's kind of funny because, like, I know I don't look my age, I'm about, not that it's super old, but it's like, I'll be 38 in about a month. And it's interesting to even just kind of look back at the differences of how kids party now versus, how I kind of grew up doing it. And it's like, it sounds so shitty to kind of say it like this, where it's like, I grew up on the Pantera home videos and all of the excess of, the 80s and such, of like the Motley Crues and so forth, that, just drinking was kind of the quote unquote badge of armor, and maybe a little cocaine here and there and some weed. But it's like, no one really kind of fucked with the heavier stuff because everyone kind of knew that where it leads. And, I have like a healthy respect for drugs and stuff like that, which is why typically I don't really do any of them anymore. And it's one of those things, working at a bar as I have the last couple of years, seeing this younger crowd, it's like they don't really want to drink. They just kind of do whatever drugs they do, hang out together in groups of 10 to 15, which is kind of interesting to see, even though they're not really hanging out since they're all on their phones. But it's just interesting to see how completely different the dynamic of relationship to drinking and drugs is from, I'll say my generation to this newer generation.
I mean, mine's even, I'm 57 years old, so I'm almost 20 years older than you, so it's like, but I do agree with you, it's like, what happened to just, partying? What happened to, listening to music and smoking some weed, or what happened to having a fucking keg party and everybody, has a good time and gets drunk or whatever on a fucking Saturday night or whatever it might be. I mean, not, like I said, not that these things are not necessarily healthy to do all the time, but it's a hell of a lot lesser evil than like we're saying. And you're correct. It's like, I mean, how do you really party on like fucking pain pills and shit anyway? I mean, I've seen, believe me, I mean, it's like, how do you? That's not a party drug. I mean, people are like nodding out, falling asleep, fucking, It's not partying, I mean, I don't know. It's just times change. I mean, I warn my daughter, she's 19 years old, she goes to LSU, so she's a college student, and, I warn her constantly, and, thank God she's a smart kid. Said, look, y'all want to do a little drinking when y'all go to y'all's parties, that's fine. I said, but whatever you do not, because she had a friend that died from something laced with all girls she worked with, teenage, like a young girls, like, 17, 18-year-old girl. And, so between the stories that I've told her and, the reality of what she sees around her these days, hopefully we scared the shit out of her enough to not try to touch, any type of heavy drugs.
Yeah, I don't know. I've tried thinking, like I said, just, working in a bar, it's really interesting because you just kind of observe all the kind of razor's edge relationship that there is with things. I'm drinking to celebrate, but then all of a sudden you had one too many and now you're not having a good time and you're the asshole who's starting shit and maybe starting a fight, or you're just kind of ruining your relationship with somebody. It's really interesting just to kind of see it happening as you're sober and just kind of taking it all in, although people will tell you that's not what's happening, and you're like, I mean, you're the person that's been drinking for the last 7 hours. I've had nothing, so I think I'm going to kind of tend to believe my side of the story versus yours.
Exactly.
Kind of something, as someone who does not have a kid and is not really interested in that for myself, I do find it interesting to kind of talk about how it is for someone else to kind of live this duality of life. I mean, you are a family man, you're married, you have a daughter, as you said, that's college aged. How has that been to navigate throughout your career? I mean, as you said when we started, 30 years into this career and almost 20 of it you've had a child. How has that been to navigate through?
The situation with my ex-wife, who is my daughter's mom, it's one of those things. It's very difficult to make a relationship or a marriage work when somebody's on tour so often. So our marriage failed, because I was in Crowbar and down full time, and it was, like just nonstop, touring the world and just never being home. Thankfully, I have a wonderful relationship with my daughter, and she was young. When we got divorced, she was only going on 5, so she was very young. Which when I kind of figured that this is not going to work, and I talked to her mother about it. We both were kind of like, let's not let this thing drag on until she's a teenager or something, and then go through the inevitable. Let's just end it. It's not going to work. But my situation now. I give all the credit to the fact that our Robin and I's marriage is very successful is because we travel together and work together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I had met your wife at a show when you guys played here in Grand Rapids many years ago, and it was one of those things. I was talking to a friend that had you on the show, and he was just like, "Oh, just talk to Robin. Like that's how you get him on the show." And I was like, "Okay." I got the email, and then for whatever reason, the email on my end kept saying it wasn't going through, and I was like, "Okay, like I'll just try again." And then suddenly, I think it was the next day, I realized I had like 18 outgoing messages or something like that, and they all went through at the same time, and I was like, cool, now I just look like a fucking weirdo who doesn't know how to use email.
It happens, man. These fucking, it's like, that's why, like, when I'm at home, I'm kind of old school. I still like to use the laptop, it just works so much better. I don't have an expensive phone anyway, but I have troubles with this thing, on and off a couple of times a fucking week where email's not working right or messages aren't going through or whatever. And it's like, when you do all your business on the phone through email, basically, and text, which we do when we're on the road, as business, messages and emails and whatnot every day. So, you need the fucking thing to work properly, and it just doesn't always happen.
How has that been for you? I mean, it's kind of funny, you see a lot of these guitar players and musicians now kind of switching to, updating with the times, with these Kempers and these Axe effects and so forth and these profilers. And, then I'm sure if I were to ask you what your rig is, I'm sure you have tired and true actual heads, actual cabs, pedals that you're actually switching yourself. How has it been to kind of see a lot of these changes to where, being a touring musician would probably be easier with, fly-in dates and so forth, and having the consistency of, what these profilers do. But what is it that keeps you kind of rooted in more of the how you came up with more of the tactile playing?
I guess I'm just setting my ways. You know, I mean, I've been doing it so long. It's kind of, I mean, do I think the Kimbers are great? Yes, but when I close my eyes, you know, I can tell, even if you run it through a 412, I can just tell that it's not a guitar head. You know, it sounds great, but, and, you know, like in the studio, we mix, tones off the computer with, like I still use my old Randall RG100ES heads from the 80s. That's what we use. That's been on every Crowbar record. I've been using them with Down as well recently, but you know, we do mix some stuff. Like, you know, we'll go on Amplitude and find some tones that we like and kind of blend together to get a fatter tone and whatnot. But for me, I'm just set old school. I mean, I'm kind of like, you know, I guess a dinosaur, so to speak, or you know, the way I look at it is, you know, hey man, I'm proud to be a dying breed. I know where it's all headed, but you know, for me, it's just you know, an amplifier and a cabinet, just like for me, I could never be like one of these, like, and nothing, believe me, nothing against these bands at all, but I could never be like in ear with everything direct and no cabinets and stuff like this. It's just not for me, you know. I'm old school. It's got to be loud on stage. I need to feel the stage vibrating and shaking. I mean, it's probably why I can't hear worth a shit, but you know, it is. You know, it's just part of the job.
It's funny. I recently invested in the last couple, basically around the pandemic, decided to buy a whole new setup. So I bought a cabinet head, and I was like, what do I want? What kind of tone do I want? And I was like, man, this is why people like those things, because then it's like, oh, what tone do I want today? Oh, I can just get this one right now, and you don't have to kind of figure it out and fuck around with your tone, you know, your different knobs, and find something that's uniquely yours. But it is kind of, you know, I was reading this book about the Wu-Tang Clan making that record that they sold to the Pharma Dude, and the whole concept started because in the first couple of pages of the book, they talk about how we've lost the experience of having to do things to gain the experience. So with music, that is, it was, you know, you're no longer walking to the store and creating this kind of hive mind of like-minded people who want this album or want physical music, and there's no sacrifices being made anymore to get things, to get art. And it was kind of funny because as I was reading that, I happened to look over at my cab and I was just like, you know, it's funny because I'm still fucking dialing in like my tone and what I like and how I want it. And I go, and when I get it and people, you know, come and play through it and they're like, oh, it sounds real good. I'm like, yeah, fuck yeah, it does, doesn't it? Because like I spent the time fucking missing, like dialing in every little thing. So it kind of creates more of a sense of pride when someone compliments you on it versus just like, yeah, sounds just like that head that's being profiled on your you know, Axe Effects or whatever. So it was kind of funny thinking about it, even in something as innate as dialing in a tone on a guitar head, that same thing still kind of rings true.
Yeah. I mean, I agree with you, and it's the same. You know, it's like with me. I mean, I love my tone. I get a lot of compliments on it from the sound guys. You know, everywhere we play, and you know, it works for us, and it works for us. And like I said, I'm old school. Like I remember talking to Ronnie James Dio when Down was on tour with Heaven and Hell. And still, it's just gotten the in-ear stuff, and was loving it. And I asked, you know, me and Ronnie were talking about it, and I asked him, I said, would you ever think of doing anything like that? And he said, Kirk, I'm just too old for that. He said, I'm setting my ways. He said, you know, Tony Iommi and Keith Geezer play so fucking loud on stage. He goes, you know, he goes, literally, I have vocal in my monitors, and I have drums, and he goes, because they're just so old school. And that's the thing too, is like people don't even have cabinets on stage a lot now. Yeah. But these old school guys still, you know, you see Saxon or something, it's like he's really using 6 cabinets and 3 heads. You know, it's like it's real. You know, it's not, you know, it's not just a show. All these guys are old school, and that's kind of how I am. I'm just setting my ways, and I'm happy with what I got. And if they do come out with something that I really think is better, not easier or more convenient, but actually better sounding, then I'll do it. But I'll use it. But until then, I'll haul around cabinets and heads and get the tone that I want.
Yeah, there's definitely something I think that's really interesting about players who have their sound, and I feel like we don't really have that anymore. I mean, it's not to say that people don't have their tone, but I think a lot of it is. It's gone. It's kind of been, I mean, for lack of a better word, it's been digitized. It's been sampled. It's been, it kind of piggybacks again off of the book I was reading where, they say that, there's this devaluation of something where art, it's a one of one, whereas when you have something and it's replicated 100,000 million times over, it kind of loses its authenticity, originality. And I feel like with guitar tone, I feel like there's certain players, people can go, yeah, Randy Rhoads, I love how his tone sounds like this, or Eddie Van Halen, and it's like those are people who worked at it, not just, okay, exactly. Here's the plugin and here we go. And I don't think we have that anymore with players. I think we've kind of lost the originality of this is someone and I can tell based on what makes them uniquely them.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with it. It's like some people, I just think it's the convenience, of modern technology, with the stuff that makes people, maybe not search or work so hard to find something that's their own. I mean, like I said, it's no different than if I'm writing riffs. It's like I have my influences, but I don't want my riffs to sound like, oh my God, he took that from this song or something,
Right.
It's like, no, I have my influences, but I work hard to make sure that the riffs sound original, and some people don't give a shit. I hear songs and I'm like, Jesus Christ, this sounds exactly like this song or this, whatever. And it's like, especially with pop music, so many songs are so, I mean, you can just be driving. You don't even need a guitar anywhere near you, and you can pick out the entire song with the chord progression because all of these fucking pop songs have the same, same chord progression and shit. It's the same chords formulated. It's the same thing. There's nobody puts the effort to really try to, I guess, make it more original, make it different than everybody else, and because it works. They're making money. They're selling records. The kids love it, and I mean, I remember when I was young. My dad telling me, he said, son, the problem is people are lazy. He said, people are too quick to accept mediocrity. Like whatever you shove down their throat, and we were talking about music, not just I mean, it does kind of pertain to anything in life, but we were talking strictly about music. He said people don't want to take the time to search for something that's different, that's original, that's really great. If it's just like whatever is shoved down their throat, they just accept it and okay, great, this band's great, and that's that. And I mean, I do agree with his him telling me that. I agree. People, that's why so many bands don't really sound original. They don't work at trying to sound original. They're just satisfied with, sounding like they're their favorite band or something, basically. Instead of having an original sound that's all their own.
Well, I think what gets kind of interesting about it too is, kind of talking about more of the music business side, is it seems like you get these hot producers or hot songwriters that everyone wants to start using. And I mean, it's been happening, I mean, honestly, well before even I was alive and probably when you were a young kid. But, even looking at someone like, was it Quincy Jones? Is it Quincy Jones?
Right.
Who, I mean, he worked worked with everyone from fucking Kiss to, Bon Jovi to, had everything. And it's like, I think a lot of people would probably point to some of those, especially working with Kiss, where it's like, oh, well, he was the reason they started sucking. And it's like, but he also was what allowed them to introduce them to a whole nother demographic of people who then maybe went backwards and are like, yo, Kiss fucking rocks. Check out this shit.
Right.
So, I mean, it's like, I sometimes feel that I do think that pop music is a bit, it's oversaturated and over-polished in every sense of the word. I mean, when it takes 25 people to quote-unquote write a song that's 2 minutes and it barely has anything other than a hook, it's like, okay, why did it take 25 of you? But we also live in...
full of, people to do it. I get exactly what you're saying.
Yeah, but I think the other thing too is though is as I've gotten older and watched a lot more of these like band documentaries and read a lot more of these books, I think the thing that people also don't realize is most bands are kind of steered by one main songwriter. I mean, I think the idea is that everyone thinks that you get together as a 4 or 5 piece or whatever, and you all work together on writing songs, and maybe that does still happen, but I would think by and large, it seems that usually it's 1 or 2 people that really steer the ship and really do the bulk of the songwriting. And I don't think people realize that it's not always the singer doesn't write all the lyrics, the guitar player may not write all the riffs, like it might be the drummer who does most of it.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, like with us, like, if it's Crowbar, if it's Down, Kingdom of Sorrow, whatever, usually somebody comes up. I mean, like with Crowbar, it's usually me. Usually come up with initially with the first riff, like the first idea. But then the other guys feed off of what I got, and we do write together, We do bounce riffs, off one another. Same thing with Down, Phil might come up with something, I might come Pepper, whatever. Jimmy Bauer, it doesn't make a difference, Pat might come up with something. But we bounce ideas off of one another, and it really does become a true collaboration. But, then there's bands, where, like you said, there's one guy that writes everything, or, even like a band like Kiss, like if you go back to the old days, the original, band and everything, before they started using outside writers and all that stuff. Most of the songs, if you look at who wrote it, obviously Gene and Paul wrote most of them, but they wrote them themselves. Like Goose is written by Simmons, Strutter's written by Stanley. It's like, Cold Gin's written by Frehley. It's like, they would kind of just divide it, which I always thought was really smart too, because like Gene and Paul are both great songwriters, and even though Ace didn't write much with Kiss, the stuff he did write was great. But to me, it was like, well, this works great. You got 2 guys that can each write. They have different writing styles, but they're both great at it, and they both sing great in their own style, even though it's different. It's different styles, and it makes it, for them touring and shit, like a hectic touring schedule, like when they were a young band working so hard. It's like, being able to split vocal duties with somebody, to me, being the one dude with a mic in front of his mouth, I'm like, God, I would give anything if somebody else could sing half the fucking set, So I always thought it was smart, and not just your bands where, you got your vocal harmony, bands, but stuff like going back old school with bands like the Beatles and stuff, If Lennon was a main writer on a song, he would normally sing it or something, Same with Paul McCartney, and it's like, that's kind of like what Kiss kind of they said stuff around. But I always thought it was great when you take a band like Fleetwood Mac or something. You literally had obviously Stevie Nicks, but Christine would be, and of course fucking Lindsey Buckingham as well. All 3 with lead singers having their own hit huge hits and stuff. And you don't really get that these days.
No, it's funny. I was just talking to, I was on a podcast last night talking about this band Alexis on Fire from Canada. And I was like, the thing that makes them so unique is that they have 3 vocalists in the band. And, 2 of them are guitar players and write, but they can kind of cover everything from a very aggressive scream kind of thing to all the way to the very clean choruses that you kind of hear on stuff. And I go, but the fact that they have all 3 doesn't like make any one kind of have to do something more than is needed of them, and especially live. I haven't gotten to see the band live yet, but it's one of those where I feel like that would be such a strength to them, where it's like, I don't have to sing a full song. I only have to sing this one backing vocal for this one song, so I can kind of really give that part its due. And I think, it's one of those where I was like, I think, back in the day, you had so many bands that had the multi-instrumentalists and multi-vocalists and so forth, and you're able to pull off all these things, and now I don't really feel like it is that way. But it is kind of interesting to look at that as, I think, a strength that a lot of people don't tap into.
No, big time. And it's like, like when I just mentioned Fleetwood Mac, but I would say one of the real prime examples too would be like the Eagles or something,
100%.
Where it's like, I had their own shit that they sang lead on and wrote that were like hits. You know what I mean? You know, of course they have beautiful harmonies as well, but you know, I just feel like, you know, these days it's fewer and you know, and it's more, you know, few and far between with the situations like that where you have an entire band full of guys that can all sing or write. It's like, you know, singing has gotten to the point where, you know, I mean, I'm not the biggest hip hop fan in the world, but, you know, I mean, look, it's an art, no doubt about it. But, you know, you don't have to be able to sing, to have a singing voice. You don't even have to be able to hit a fucking note that's on key. You know, and it's the same thing with a lot of quote, you know, I guess aggressive music where everything is atonal vocally. You know, it's like people don't have to even be able to, like, to sing at all. I mean, for God's sakes, I'm the furthest singer in the world from a great vocalist. But I do try to have melody and hooks in what I do, you know. But, you know, it's gotten to the point where, you know, you literally people that people are like, oh my God, this guy or this girl is such a great vocalist. And I'm like, it's all it is just screaming. You know, it's not really that difficult to do, in my opinion. You know, it's not really singing, you know, but, you know, to each his or her own, whatever, you know. I mean, I'm not here to judge, really, but, you know, I just think that that's why I tend to, you know, like we're on tour with Spirit Adrift, and I really love what they're doing, what Nate does, and you know, the style of music that they play, because, you know, like him and I have talked, you know, during the tour a good bit of we pretty much have the exact same influences and stuff, you know, so we have a lot in common there, and but, you know, I love the way that, you know, he brings an old school approach the same way I do with everything, where, you know, we have our influences, but we try to pay, you know, homage to that, but we also want to sound original and write, you know, and do our own thing. But you know, I just love that they kind of do, you know, like I'd never really heard of the band. I'm so out of the mix, you know. Now I'm starting to obviously, you know, tour for a couple of weeks and find out more and more about them. But you know, I love them, and you know, I really do. And but I like the approach and the influences that are more old school, which is what my influences are. You know, it's hard as time goes on. I guess maybe you can call me old, but, you know, it's harder for me to really find influences. I mean, not influence. It's hard. As time goes on, it's harder for me to find newer bands that I think are really special, that sound great, that are original, that are doing something different. You know, that have hooks in the songs and great riffs and whatnot, you know, because there's so many bands in my old brain anyway, you know, my old opinion, that really just sound the same, you know, and it's just, it is what it is. But I mean, I think that's why I tend to listen to more old school stuff and just older music in general.
Well, it's funny you say that, because I actually was thinking probably about a year or so ago, you know, I was listening to, again, I was at the bar, so like Sweet Caroline came on at the bar, and then it was, you know, Pour Some Sugar on Me, and it was, you know, some of these older songs from before even the kids that were at the bar were alive to hear them. And I kind of was thinking to myself, what is it that makes these songs so timeless and classic? You know, you can throw on an old Elton John song, you can throw on Queen, you can throw on Van Halen, you know, Thin Lizzy, whatever. You can throw on these bands, and these are bands that I grew up with, because my dad was the age, you know, as a younger teen, that when these bands came out. What is it about these songs and these bands that remain so timeless and so multi-generational, but seemingly we don't have bands that are doing it? Like, the only band I can honestly think of that I think will be that band, because they seemingly are now, is the Foo Fighters. But outside of them, I can't really think of another band, and I don't know why. Why, like, that era of music continues to move forward, and there's nothing that resonates as much.
Dude, it's crazy that you say the Foo Fighters, because I was talking to a really good friend of mine and about the Foo Fighters, and I was like, you know, I said, because I go on these kicks and I'll just go like all week, all I do is watch YouTube videos of Foo Fighters concerts and shit, you know, and I'm like, you know, Dave Grohl is really doing his best to, like, single-handedly fucking save rock and roll music.
Mm-hmm.
He really is. I mean, that's the only band that I can think of that, and all of my friends, guys my age and all of that, at first it didn't like the band, and now are really turning into real fans, and it's just, I mean, it's such a tragedy what happened with Taylor Hawkins, but, I mean, I really think that Dave Grohl is his passion and his love for great music, because, I mean, he's a huge, like, Cheap Trick fan like I am, and, I mean, we have a lot of the same influences as well, even though some of his, I mean, some of them might be, I don't know, I would say we have a lot of the same influence, but yeah, I mean, I really think that they're like the only band that's come out in the last 25, 30 years that, because everybody else is older than that. I mean, you don't realize, Judas Priest is 50 years now. It's like, Motley Crue's 40-something years or whatever. It's like, so, I mean, in the last 25, 30 years, I mean, there's, the Foo Fighters have really been one band that has consistently just put out great music, and they're, just such a global phenomenon, I mean, they can sell out fucking Wembley Stadium in fucking London with no opening act, and then they would, they would try to keep it fun. They bring out, all these guest artists and stuff, older people that, people haven't heard of in forever or whatever. I saw one where, they brought out, I think it was a little girl.
Oh, yeah.
Like a little young, like maybe 11, 12-year-old, little black girl that was killing it on drums. And I was like, this is so great. Yeah, I was like, this is fucking awesome. He loves music so much, and he just, he found this little kid, and he's like, you know what? I'm bringing her out, and she's gonna kick ass, and people are gonna see it. It's such a cool thing of it, man. He's really an awesome dude.
Yeah, it's definitely, he is, I mean, I think anybody who is into, rock or whatever has nothing but nice things to say about Dave. Just, makes great music, seems like a genuinely great person, does it for all the right reasons, kind of, pays it forward to the bands that, he came up with, whether they're in the punk or rock or whatever scene, as well as, kind of new and upcoming bands as well. So, I think he does it right, and I think it's obvious and it's genuine, and I think that's the thing, is when you do something and it's genuine and people feel it and people can see it, and I think that's why people connect with him and the band so much.
Yep, I agree.
Kind of speaking to an authenticity kind of and genuineness, I always kind of had said when I was doing the podcast, if I ever ended up going to New Orleans, hopefully I would have you on the show at some point afterward to talk to you about it, because there's this kind of mysticism or romanticism of sorts of New Orleans and what it is and represents to a lot of people. And it was really interesting to go for the first time, and maybe you can help me kind of put my finger on the feeling or the word, but there just kind of seemed to be this sense of kind of melancholy, but also of one of triumph at the same time. When we had gone, it was shortly after I think it was the Hard Rock casino hotel thing.
Oh, God, yeah, collapsing, yeah.
And I remember being in the cemetery where Nicolas Cage's thing's at, with the plot there, and I was looking across the street and could see the condemned building still with all the police tape and stuff around it, and overheard one of the guides saying that there was still some of the bodies over that they haven't found over there, and just kind of hearing the guides kind of telling what they think had happened, hearing that there was rumors that they tried to buy out the whole block. Some businesses wouldn't do it, that maybe they rushed and used shitty supply, so that way this would fall, and then it would make other people not want to be there anymore so they could buy the property. And it was just kind of weird, because I feel like hearing that, it like wouldn't surprise me, because that's kind of the greed and all that of corporations and so forth. But it's one of those two where I felt, being in the graveyard, with some of these local legends and so forth of, the city's past, and, speaking to, why this grave exists and why they have these cemeteries where they do, so they don't flood and all this kind of stuff, that I just got this sense of like, you as a city and as a culture kind of are always dealing with just tragedy after tragedy after tragedy, but that it never really seems to lessen your spirits, that you kind of always know that, you know, with every valley there comes a peak, or vice versa. And I feel like it kind of creates this culture of people who are very present for things, and very thankful for everything. And I know that seems really weird to pin just on a city and a community, but I really got that sense when I was there, that this is people who go through real shit and know that it's not always going to be bad.
Dude, I mean, that's pretty damn well said, honestly. And I agree. I mean, New Orleans is known as the city that care forgot. That's literally like a motto, you know. And it's kind of, I mean, there's no other place like it, love it or hate it. You know, there's definitely no other place like it. And you know, we have had a lot of tragedy, of course, but it's just, you know, it's somehow the community of people always seem to pull together, you know, when something bad happens. And you know, it's like we're able to shake off things and still go on, you know, being a party city, you know, and a city that loves to have fun, that loves to eat, that worships music and creates brilliant music. And you know, I mean, that's kind of like I tell people all the time. They're like, well, you know, what is it like? I'm like, well, you got to realize, you know, the city's built around tourism. Mm-hmm. So it's like the whole real, I guess, motto of the city, or the whole thing is just it's about, you know, eat, drink, and be merry. It's about eating, drinking, partying, enjoying the fun things. And it's such a small city geographically, and it really is a very tight knit community. You know, people can say what they want about racism and stuff like that, and the truth is, you know, when things are tough, you know, everybody of every race, color, creed, whole 9 yards, sexual orientation, everything, all come together to help one another, you know. So it's, you know, it's just something where, you know, when we get beaten down, we always seem to survive.
Do you feel growing up in New Orleans really made you more adept at being a career musician?
Yeah, because you know, I mean, there's so many. I have so many friends that I played with, you know, and played in other heavy metal bands and shit, like in the early to mid '80s, late '80s, whatever. Who are all career musicians. I mean, they're not traveling musicians, but they're house, you know, musicians playing cover songs. But they still make a nice living playing music, which is what they love to do, you know. So they're very fortunate to be able to do it. We just chose different paths, but yeah, I mean, you know, watching so many successful musicians, and so many of them took so long to get recognition. I mean, you know, it took so long for, you know, like a Dr. John or something to actually win a fucking Grammy Award, or Irma Thomas or somebody who's been, or, you know, they call her Queen of Soul, that's been around forever. I mean, it took so long. I mean, I remember being a kid and the Heart, you know, Heart, obviously, you know, Hardwood Band and Nancy Wilson. They did a cover of Tell It Like It Is by Aaron Neville. I didn't know. I told my dad, I'm like, oh man, have you heard that new Heart song? He goes, son, that song is way older than you. I'm like, what? He's like, that's an Aaron Neville song. I'm like, are you serious? He goes, yeah. He said it was like a little minor hit, you know, but it took like, you know, he was maybe in his 40s when he started doing these duets with Linda Ronstadt. You know, a guy that was playing since he was a teenager, you know, and in prison and everything else, you know, had a rough go as a young man, and then you know, it's like when you watch how many New Orleans musicians don't really find notoriety and success, financial success, and just, you know, respect really until they're much older into their careers. That it kind of gives you the strength to say, you know, you just got to stick it out and believe in what you do, because it took these people a long time to actually be successful, you know, and really get known worldwide for how talented they really are.
Yeah, it was it was kind of interesting just to see in a completely different capacity. It sort of was the same for me going to Nashville for the first time as an adult earlier this year, and just seeing literally level upon level upon level at each bar we went to on kind of the Strip, and just seeing just insane monster players, and just being like, I mean, yeah, you're probably a studio musician, you're probably making a boatload of money, and this is just kind of your fun thing you do, but just to see like the caliber of musicianship is just insane. Like when you go to some of these cities that are so steeped in music culture and history, and it's funny because like you'll go and you're like, oh, this person, like no one's paying attention typically, quote unquote, or whatever, but my wife would a lot of times be like, you look bored. I'm like, nah, I'm kind of in awe of like how great this band is, and like no one seems to give a shit.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I know what you mean. It's like, and I mean, the thing that like with these New Orleans guys, I mean, so many of them started out when they were so young. They were just little kids. I mean, literally, and then they just kept for their entire life. I mean, I read one of Dr. John's books, and he talks about how they would, I mean, New Orleans has always been a 24-hour town as far as drinking and stuff like that, and how they would do, they play team things and stuff like on a Saturday, afternoon or early evening, and pack up everything and head down to the first quarter and play till the fucking sun came up. He's like, I'd play in one club for 2 hours, take a 20-minute break, go down the street to another club, get behind the piano and play there, and that was just what they did. So, I mean, when you do that, I mean, you tend to become pretty fucking good on your instrument and knowledge of music, and you got to really love it. You got to love music to do it, to that extent, the way these people did,
Absolutely. I have two more things that I wanted to bring up. I realized when we were talking, because I went through and randomly I just pick a record every now and again and throw it on my record player, and I picked up Down 2 probably about a month and a half ago, and it took me back to when it came out initially, which I think was around like middle of my high school career at that point. But it was one of those that I was kind of looking at the liner notes and so forth, and kind of thinking about when I got the record, and thinking about where I was and what I was doing. And I realized that it's 20 years old now. It came out in 2002. I mean, I would kind of be remiss for myself personally to not ask if maybe there's some memories you have looking back on the record yourself 20 years later. Like, what was the vibe? What did it mean to you? Any fun stories or anything?
I mean, in a lot of ways, it's kind of my favorite Down record because of the way we did it. I mean, a lot of people are familiar with the story. Some people aren't, but we literally were crazy enough to rent, like, a fucking 18-wheeler worth of gear, studio gear, build a makeshift studio in the barn on Phil's property, and live out there and write 15 songs and record them in 28 days without leaving, just living in the woods, in the barn, working 24/7 around the clock, pretty much in shifts, and like making that record, I always say, I'm so glad I did it, but I would never want to do it again. But we survived. I mean, it's no secret there was a lot of substance abuse, a lot of alcohol abuse, and whatever it took to get the job done, but we got the job done, so didn't sleep a whole lot for that movie, but yeah, I have tons of great memories, and really when I go back and listen, I'm really proud of that record.
I remember when listening to it, because I was a little too young to have experienced the first Down record when it first came out, but obviously through things you go backwards and find where stuff comes from. But I remember when that record came out, I was like, this, as you just kind of said, I felt like that was a record that felt lived in, that it felt like 4 or 5 dudes getting in a room doing it the old school way, and you can just feel it on the record. Like it comes through as soon as you hit play on the record, it just comes through. Like it feels like a very lived in record. Like there maybe is even some shit that like you were all working on at times. Like there's kind of this push and pull dynamic at times in the music, and I don't know, it's a very unique record to me, and it was one of the first when I was, like I said, in high school, where I kind of felt like it had that same vibe of like the records my dad was, had me grow up listening to, where it kind of had those same vibes.
Wow. Well, I mean, I appreciate that, man, and I do agree. I agree 100% with you. It's like that was, like I said, it was magic. It was something we could never duplicate that again if we lived the rest of our lives trying to do it. Every fucking day. It just wouldn't happen. It was one of those moments in time that was just magic.
Yeah, there's seemingly kind of less of that now, more and more as kind of by the byproduct of what we talked about earlier, of just things being done, copy paste, and being very convenient or lazy, however you want to put it.
Yeah, I mean, I agree, and that's kind of that's the way bands used to do it in the old days. They rent a house or something. I mean, Zeppelin did it. I know Led Zeppelin's presence was done very, very quickly with, I think, the Rolling Stones mobile unit. Jimmy Page had rented, and he basically produced it, and it was done really quickly. But it's got a couple of my favorite. Achilles' Last Stand's my favorite Zeppelin song. Nobody's Fault But Mine, T for One. I mean, those songs are great. Classic stuff, and it's just one of those things. That's the way bands used to do it, and it doesn't happen anymore.
No, it doesn't. Last topic I wanted to bring up with you, because I don't typically get to talk sports with people, because usually most people aren't necessarily. It's kind of weird. I notice either the cross section of people who are into music and sports kind of equally is a very small percentage of people. Usually one either shucked one for the other. But I know that you, obviously being a New Orleans fan, I was reading today actually that you guys made your backup quarterback now your new tight end for the Saints. How do you feel about this upcoming football season? Yeah, how do you feel about this upcoming season with no Sean Payton and just kind of a lot of question marks, I feel like, for the season with the team?
To me, the whole thing is going to ride on if Jameis Winston can do what we are hoping and praying that he can do, because he's got talent. In his first few seasons in the league, he was very successful. He's got the talent. It's just, is he going to be consistent? Is he going to not get hurt? Is he going to, I really think that's what it's going to come down to. Is Winston being healthy, and because without a quarterback, you don't have shit. And we found that out last year. We had so many fucking injuries last year. So many dudes out with COVID. We had games when we had no coaching staff. I mean, you name it. Put it this way: last year, just about anything that could go wrong did. Anything that could go wrong did go wrong last year. So hopefully, we'll get a break this year.
Yeah, my wife and I have been adamant about making the Superdome one of our next football games we go to when we travel somewhere to go see a game.
Oh man, if you get a chance to go to a Saints game, it's pretty fucking rowdy.
It seems insane. Like, it just the way that, I mean, even those like shots, like when Breeze, I can think of like some of the, like when Breeze set the touchdown record or whatever, and like they were on the field, but they had that kind of angle on it, so you could see like half of the stadium all the way up to the nosebleeds, and it's just like, it seems so intense, like almost kind of like a very spiritual kind of thing, and maybe, I hate to kind of put some weird mysticism kind of shit on it, but like it wouldn't surprise me if like the fact that was the safe haven for after Katrina for you all down there, that it's like maybe there's some kind of juju or something in there where like it's kind of what adds to the flavor of going to see a game there.
Well, I mean, a lot of people don't know this too, but it's actually the Superdome stands on the grounds of it's built over an old cemetery. So underneath the Superdome turf, basically. Way down, but there was all kind of bodies and whatnot from an old cemetery. That's they basically just paved it over and built the dome there. But yeah, man, it's just, I think it's because other than Green Bay, New Orleans is the smallest market team, and it's like we've gone through so many years of being so terrible that we're pretty much picked every year when you look at like NFL rankings and stuff, where what they do is what percentage of the metropolitan area of New Orleans goes to a game, watches a game, or listens to it on the radio. And this goes for every NFL city around the country, and we're pretty much number one every year. And the percentage, we don't have a big city, but the percentage of people that watch, listen on the radio, or go to a game is number one in the league almost every year. So we're definitely diehards.
Yeah, I think as someone who, I wouldn't say I'm a Lions fan, but it's just easy to watch the Lions since I live here in Michigan. It's always depressing because you always get this hope. Like I started watching today the Hard Knocks show following them during the training camp this year, and I'm like, man, I love our coach. I love we got Deuce Staley. We got so many great players that had embodied toughness in their playing days. And it's that same thing where you're like, I fucking want to believe, but I also don't, because for the last, I don't know, ever, you've always sucked.
Yeah, being my age, I've seen what the Lions went through as well, for all these years, man. So it's tough, but I never thought in my fucking lifetime that I would see the Saints win a Super Bowl, there was so much talk so many times about the team moving and this and that and everything else. And, after Katrina, it was all this talk to do with moving to San Antonio and blah, 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 blah. And then, 4 years after Katrina, we won the fucking Super Bowl. So, anything's possible.
Yeah, I feel like your basketball team's not too far behind either if they can keep this.
I tell you what, I don't follow basketball nearly like I do football, but yeah, with how young of a team we had and what we were able to pull off, last year with a really really young team, if what the fuck's his name, Zion can if he can fucking finally get out there and play, 90% of these fucking games. The kid is great, it's just, these injuries have been terrible, and then you got to wonder, to me, I'm like, okay, he's making all this money. Does he really have the heart? Or is he just, what is going on? Because he's showing, while the team's warming up, he's doing 360 dunks and everything else, but he can't play. I'm like, that's just my thought. But I'm like, motherfucker, if they're paying me that much money, I'll be hobbling out in that bitch on a fucking wheelchair and one crutch or whatever. Whatever you got to do. But yeah, I think the basketball team is really on an upswing, and it's one of those things. New Orleans will always be a football town, but the very few times that when we had the Hornets, they had a little success and all, then it becomes hot. People are really get behind the team. It's hard to get behind a loser. Although we've supported the Saints since 1967, but just in the last 15 years or so, they've really been worth a shit. It's many years of doom and gloom. But yeah, man, I think I agree with you. I think the basketball teams got great potential to really have a breakout year this year, make a little noise in the playoffs, and hopefully in the next fucking 2 years, 3 years or something, we can actually hit the finals.
Yeah, I caught one of Zion's first games when he came back from his first injury after his rookie season, and it was incredible to go. And like I said, there's just something about going to see local sports, like at a professional level like that, where you just kind of really get a sense of the people that go. Going to Buffalo and seeing the Sabres suck it up against the Rangers this past year was kind of fun and just like indicative of like a blue collar city that just doesn't like fuck it, we're tired, you guys suck, you're not putting forth the effort, so we're gonna let you know, and we're gonna kind of cheer the other team as well.
Well, see, like Bobby Hebert, who used to play for the Saints, he said years ago, which makes total sense. He goes, a lot of times people are looking like, okay, obviously I'm a Saints fan, but, if I were going to pull for any other team in the league, who should I pull for? He said you should pull for Buffalo. He said it's a small market, blue-collar town. He said they're in the AFC. The only time we're going to face them is, very occasionally, during the regular season or in the fucking Super Bowl. So obviously when we play them, you don't pull for them. But other than that, it doesn't hurt. If the Saints are having a really down year, you're still going to pull for them. But, I'm happy that the Bills are doing great now.
Yeah, 100%. Definitely feels like an old school mentality with the Bills and the Bills fans. And my wife and I actually went to Buffalo a couple years ago and saw a Bills-Lions game, and it was incredible to be outside in the cold and just the camaraderie again of, sports fans. And, at the time the Bills weren't any good, but I think it was Josh Allen's rookie year. So it was kind of like, it was cool to kind of see the beginning of what is now. And again, I don't get that with the Lions, so I probably will never get to experience something like that. But
it's a different level, less up there level for sure than what the Bills are at right now, man.
But I'll let you go. I know you got a show to get ready for and probably a meet and greet or something. So last question for you. Where can people find you or anything you would like to plug online?
The only thing I really do is Facebook. So the Crowbar Facebook page is really us, and my personal Kirk Winstein page is really me. So my wife does, I know, management and stuff. I have a lot to do with like the Instagram and all that. But for me, I'm not old school. I do Facebook, and that's really it.
Fair enough. Well, thank you again for taking the time. Much appreciated, and I hope everyone is safe on the rest of your tour, and hopefully you guys will come back to Michigan soon enough and can see you guys on this new record.
Awesome. Thanks, man. Have a good one, bro.
So that was my conversation with Kirk from Crowbar. I want to thank him again for taking the time. And honestly, it's always funny that, you think you know someone from all the interviews that they've done over the decades-long career that they've had. But, it was really interesting to learn that, when I had read that he had worked on a song for Body Count, I was like, I didn't know Kirk wrote for other people. And to hear that it's not something he's really done, but it's not something he wouldn't turn down, I think is interesting, because I feel like songwriting is really interesting in that, because sometimes you hear songs and you're like, oh, that's clearly so and so, like when, and I'll keep using Body Count as the example. They have a lot of contributors writing with and for them, and on the last couple of records, that song "And This Is Why We Ride," which is one of my favorite songs. But it was like, it didn't feel necessarily like a Body Count. It does, because it's got that swagger and the pacing is good. But I always was like, this doesn't feel like they wrote it. I feel like they wrote this with somebody. And then to find out that Doc Coyle wrote it, it was like, oh, that makes a lot more sense. And it's kind of in that, when you start getting in behind the scenes of songwriting and who does what, like, makes it really interesting. But I also just love the fact that some bands are willing to just have contributors come and help them make the best music they can, because at the end of the day, isn't that the point of fucking music and being in a band, is making the best music you can? And to me, I would love to see Kirk sprinkle what he does in so many other genres and so forth. And, he obviously reworked what he did for Body Count to fit more of Crowbar. But it's funny, because when you go back and listen to that song, you can kind of be like, it'd be kind of interesting to see what Ice would do over this. Like, what would he put over it? And to me, that's the interesting thing about this. And with a lot of the music that Kirk loves, which is, a lot of music you wouldn't expect him to, like, he's a huge Kiss fan and all that kind of stuff. It's interesting to see where some of those influences of his maybe come out in Crowbar or what he does, or would he write for other people and kind of bring out more of those influences for other people? So it's interesting to kind of see how songwriters are able to work with and for other people, and how they bring what they do, but also kind of meld the ideas that maybe they have for other people and other artists. So it's always interesting to kind of pick someone's brain about that process. And obviously, coming up on almost being 40 myself, with my birthday coming up, just remembering that Down 2 is celebrating 20 years. It's insane to me at times that some of these records are so fucking old. And I don't feel old at all. It's wild to, remembering going and getting that CD, because at the time I wasn't old enough when the first Down record came out to go get it, but at that point, by the time of Down 2, I had really gotten into Crowbar. I had really gotten into Pantera. COC was really big. A lot of these bands, the members that make up Down were huge monster players. And as I was getting and understanding more about musicians and players and different styles and all of these things, and that first Down record, this was the first time I kind of got to be excited about a supergroup. And, it's funny looking back. I've been reading some comments on the record, going back, listening to the first 2 Down records, and seeing people be like, this second Down record just isn't good. It's not, it doesn't have the magic of the first one. It feels phoned in, whatever. And to me, I feel like what I love about Down and what I love about those records is I don't feel like it's not a band in the traditional sense of like every year and a half we get a new Down record. It's really a collection of a snapshot of literally that time of when those guys got together and recorded this music. And who they were on the first Down record, there was no expectation of what it was going to be. I mean, I guess maybe of like, oh, well, there's Phil, there's, Kirk, there's, Pepper, there's, all these people. Like, sure, there's the idea of what it could be, but we didn't know what it was going to be. And so when you go into a second record with a supergroup, there's more of that, well, I guess it's going to sound like the first record. But it probably never will, because how can it? At this point, all of those people have put out other records. They've been informed by other things that have happened to them. It's not going to sound the same. And I think almost any quote-unquote supergroup that's ever come out, no 2 records really sound the same. I mean, I'm thinking of the Damn Things. The first Damn Things record didn't sound anything like the second record, and by and large, it's mostly the same people on the record. You look at a band like Chickenfoot with Sammy Hagar and Joe Satriani and Michael Anthony and all those people and Chad Smith, like those 2 records don't really sound the same. So I think when you put a supergroup together, I think the expectation is whatever the first thing is that they do, that's the sound, because that's how most bands kind of are. But I guess in a larger sense of thinking, supergroups when they come together is kind of how we should approach every band. We shouldn't pigeonhole them into what they've done before or expect them to be just this thing, but they are the amalgamation of all the experiences that have happened to them since, and that's essentially what it is a small snapshot sonically of where they all were at that time. So we should allow for growth. We should allow for differences to come in and there to be change and to be welcoming of it. But sadly, like a lot of things, we don't welcome change, and we just kind of argue and bitch about things that don't live up to our expectations, even though we have no hand in what in the creation of these things. So I don't understand why we feel we can have such ownership of these feelings that we have for the art that people are creating. But that is a larger talking point for a different time. Starting to wrap up this episode, if you would like to keep up with Kirk, you can find him on Facebook at Kirk.Winstein on Facebook, Instagram at Crowbar Music, Twitter at Crowbar Rules, or you can go to crowbar-zeroandbelow.com for all your Crowbar news, merch, tickets and updates and all that kind of stuff. Go support the band. They are road dogs for sure. I definitely need to try to catch a Crowbar set. I haven't gone in a while. It is sonic baptism, if there ever was one, with the low end of Kirk and his very distinct voice. If you'd like to keep up with the podcast, you can find us simple enough at BrewSpeakPod on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. If you are able to support us monetarily, you can do such over at patreon.com/BrewSpeakPod. Email me at brutallySpeaking@gmail.com. And lastly, I want to thank our sponsors for their continued support. If you can support them, that would be greatly appreciated. Head on over to rockabilia.com, use our code BRUTALLY at checkout, and take 10% off your total purchase order. The Bean Bastard, head on over to thebeanbastard.com, pick up some delicious coffee. They have tons of other things outside of just coffee. And if you live in the Buffalo, New York area, please go check out their brick and mortar store. Lots of awesome 80s memorabilia in there. It's a cozy little spot to drink some coffee. They do really well with partnering with other local businesses around the area as well. Highly recommended if you're in the area. Last but not least, On Point Pomade, use our code BSP15 at checkout and take 15% off your total purchase order. Keep your beard and hair looking on point. And for the Brutally Speaking podcast, I am John, and I'll talk to you later today, if you listen to it, with Justin Foley of Killswitch Engage and Libeka. That was a fun chat. Can't wait for you to get into it.